Hey folks, today's video is going to be a bit of a hard one to do because it's about the Jews' situation in Nazi Germany. So it's a bit of a difficult one because there's just so much there. So I'm going to try and cram as much as I can into about 10-15 minutes. What I would start off by saying is we know the obvious statistic that he was responsible for about 6 million Jews, we think, being killed under their Nazi reign. That's more than the population of Scotland, just to put that into perspective. If you were going to divide up very easily Hitler's treatment of Jews, you would put it into before Kristallnacht in 1938 and after Kristallnacht. A lot of the tortures that Jews faced from 1933 to 1938 were psychological ones, and it's been said that Hitler got a lot of his influence for what he did to Jews by what was actually happening in the or happened in America with the treatment of black Americans in the southern states under Jim Crow laws. So a lot of his psychological treatments towards Jews, such as you know, you're not allowed to go in this restaurant, you can't go in the same park, you can't use the same public facilities such as swimming pools, etc. They are directly taken from America, and the idea was, you know, if black Americans were leaving the southern states to go north, Jews would do the same and leave Germany to go to other areas around it, because Germany is Central Europe, and that did happen. That really did happen. So I'll try, time permitting, to touch on that with a true story at the end of the video, which, if you've been in my history classes, you will have heard before. Hitler's original idea was not extermination of Jews, it was to make Jews leave Germany, to get them out of Germany, and then obviously it evolved into something a lot more sinister over the years, which was awful to see, unfortunately. So where do we start? We'll start in 1933, I think would probably be best. Obviously Hitler became Chancellor at this point in Germany, and there was about just over 500,000 Jewish people in Germany at that time, so about 566,000. Shortly into his reign as Chancellor, the Nazis did open a concentration camp, Dachau, which was near Munich. So that was the first one to be opened, and it was followed by others such as Buchenwald, which was in central Germany, near Weimar, which of course was famous for the Weimar Republic. Early actions by the Nazis were things such as boycotting Jewish shops and businesses. So this happened in 1933, and again it's psychological. It's not physical bad treatment of Jews or killing Jews, it's actually hitting them in the pockets, making their life very, very difficult, making them miserable under that regime. They did issue decrees defining exactly what a non-Aryan would be, and this also happened in 1933, and it was said that it was anyone who came from a non-Aryan, especially Jewish parents or grandparents. So if you had one parent or grandparent who was seen as non-Aryan, especially if they were Jewish, then you are non-Aryan. You would not be classed as a member of the Aryan race. Jews were not allowed to be landowners later in 1933, so again it's another way of affecting the wealth and status of Jewish people. And interestingly, by the back end of 1933, Jews had been banned from being newspaper editors, so they couldn't have their almost like right of reply to the Nazis or spread views that were obviously anti-Nazi because of what was being said about them. Obviously Germany was suffering from the Depression, so by the time you get into 1934, Jews were banned from the Labour Front, which was one of Hitler's solutions to the Depression, to give German people a bit of pocket money and a roof over their head. And also Jews were not allowed to hold legal qualifications such as a law degree, so you would not have access to highly paid jobs such as lawyers and judges in the future. By 1935, no Jews were allowed to be in the armed forces, so he's basically therefore saying that you've got no right of defending Germany, or when Hitler brought conscription in, this wouldn't include giving jobs to Jews. Now, probably the most famous thing to come out of 1935 was the Nuremberg laws, which basically would not allow any Jewish person to marry an Aryan person, and it would also mean they could not have sexual relations between an Aryan and a non-Aryan, so in other words, a German and a Jew. Alright? Hitler would ease off a little bit by 1936, the Nazis, because of the Olympics came to Berlin, and with the Olympics meant the eyes of the world would be on Germany, so world press would be there, and the Nazis are trying to see themselves really as an honourable, legitimate political party. So what they wanted was any foreign visitor to the country not to see what was really happening to Jews. So it was sort of just really pulled back, so world press and visitors wouldn't go home with these horror stories of what was really going on. By the time you get into 1937, Jews were basically being banned from professions. So again, anything that would give you status, anything you could have maybe some pride in, so something you might have been growing up wanting to be a teacher or a dentist or anything like that, an accountant, also anything that would get, maybe you good pay from the public sector, it's starting to, you can't do that anymore. So think about it, he was not going to risk a Jewish person teaching the German youth and basically showing what a sham the Nazi views were and how ridiculous they were. Jews were also not allowed to benefit from tax breaks that were given to German citizens at this time, and also child allowance that was put forward for families of children did not include Jews. Now, this just gets worse by the time we get into 1938, and identity cards are being brought in, and this is basically any police officer asks to see an identity card for a Jew, they've got to show it, and that's for anyone over the age of 15. So if you've seen the film The Pianist, where it's actually based in Poland, there's the very famous scene where his shelf collapses in the flat he's hiding out in, and the angry brainwashed Nazi lady who lives next door comes out and demands to see an identity card straight away. Well, identity cards began in Germany actually in 1938 for any Jewish person over the age of 15. Attacks on the professions continued, and Jews were not allowed to practice as doctors, to practice medicine, so you wouldn't get a Jewish doctor anymore. So that, again, well-paid job, well-paid, respectable profession, remove Jews from it. Which is kind of ironic, because the Nazis had been producing propaganda in a book called The Toadstool, Poisonous Mushroom, that almost had like Jewish doctors preying on German Aryan women prior to this, and this was just propaganda that was given to children, so they would show basically Jews as paedophiles and perverts and such. And one of the cartoons in this children's book showed a Jewish doctor who was, like, abusing his position almost. So it's very different for any Peppa Pig books that children would get in a quite normal society now. The Nazis in 1938 is like the watershed year. So there was an example of a synagogue being attacked in 1938 before Kristallnacht, which was, like, really, you could see things were stepping up. But by 1938 the real watershed happened on the 7th of November, when Ernst von Rath, a German politician, was shot and basically killed by a Jewish, I think, 17-year-old in Paris. And basically what happens was von Rath died on November the 9th, and that's when Kristallnacht started. And that's the night of the broken glass, when basically all Jewish synagogues, houses, businesses are attacked, destroyed. Attacks on Jews happen, and it was called Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, because the glass was said to have been gleaming in the streetlights like crystals once the Nazi attacks finished. And there was a fine brought out of 1 billion German marks for the damage that was caused. The Jews had to pay it. So the Nazis encouraged smashing of Jewish property, and then forced the Jews to pay for the damages. There's stories as well of when like the attacks were taking place and the fires even were taking place in Jewish properties, of German fire brigade under the Nazis obviously standing there watching and putting out the fires if this spread to the German property, but any Jewish property was just left. So it can show you how far the brainwashing had gone at this point. By 1939, any gold and silver items for Jews were taken away, so their own personal wealth was gone, and they also would lose their houses and homes and be forced to relocate into Jewish houses. So something you've worked for your entire life, whether it's gold and silver or a nice house for your family, is gone. What is actually quite disappointing is actually a ship with over 900 Jewish refugees on left Germany, and it was sailing for the likes of Cuba, the USA, etc., and all the countries sent these Jewish immigrants back. It was sent back to Europe. Curfews were brought in for Jews, so they weren't allowed to be outdoors after dark, so 8 o'clock in the winter and 9 in the summer, so again human rights impeded. And by 1939 basically Jews are being gathered in ghettos near railroads for a final goal, and the idea with ghettos was make the conditions as poor as possible, put all the Jews in one area, limit food supplies, very poor living conditions, etc., and the population would die out. This didn't happen quick enough for the Nazis actually, so obviously the final solution was another goal further down the line. But you can see, for example, with the film The Pianist, where you see Vladislav Spielman's family taken into the ghetto. It's a very, very good film, actually, very good if you want to learn about this time in history. And you see how they lose quite a nice apartment and way of life in Poland when the Nazis take over, and they are then crowded into ghettos, cramped conditions, too many people to a house. Horrific scenes that take place in that stick out in my mind is when an old lady is hounded for a stew that she's made, and she drops it to the floor when wrestling with someone who's trying to steal it, and he eats it in front of her off the floor, so it shows the hunger and desperation. There was also the awful scene where the person drops dead, a father with his son, in the streets, and people so used to it, perhaps, people looking out for themselves, just step over the body with the crying child next to it. I also remember with reading about this, a story of a girl, I believe it was Rosa Ginsburg, who said that her parents died because of disease and hard work, not having the correct facilities to live in, and basically left her and her brother orphaned in the ghetto, where they were having to go out under the wall, eat from bins, etc., and come back to the ghetto because it was the only place they knew. So getting out of the ghetto wasn't the problem, it was surviving on the outside, and Jews were becoming, with these poor conditions and poor facilities and food, etc., even basically looked nothing like their former selves, and it was starting to look like the propaganda of subhuman race that the Nazis were putting out there, because they couldn't eat and they couldn't have proper conditions to live in. And there's an awful scene in The Pianist where you see part of the ghetto actually allows people to walk past and look in to see what it's like, and the Nazi soldiers, for their own entertainment, are trying to create a freak show of a child dancing with an adult, hinting at perversion, a short man with an extremely tall woman hinting at a freak show, so trying to show the propaganda was real, which is awful to see. So this is part one. I'm guessing we're going to go into part two, so thanks for watching.